Welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. We'll guide you through the ups and downs of note investing and teach you all about the nitty-gritty details of the business that other people won't talk about. Your host, Dan Deppen, is a former aerospace engineer and product manager who transitioned away from cubicle life to full-time note investing in 2018. Our website is www.fusionnotes.com, where you can subscribe to this podcast, comment, and find links to other information on note investing.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Dan Deppen. Welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. And today I'm joined by Melanie Jacob from Jacob Associates. So Melanie, how you doing?
Pretty good, Dan.
Good.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course. So, had you on before, so it's great to have you back on again. And today we were going to talk about REOs. And I know you have like one specific deal that's actually kind of a work in progress.
Sure.
Right now. So I thought it'd be good. If you could kind of run us through some of that. I know it's been kind of like a long saga.
Long process. And
it's not even done yet. So maybe we'll do a second one at some point after like everything's over. But yeah, maybe you could start us off by introducing us to what you got going.
I appreciate it, Dan, because you're really much further along in this note investing and have had a few more REOs than I have. But, Phil and I have been buying notes. I bought our first note in October of 18. And I think this was our third deal. Mm-hmm. And we were probably a little bit anxious about getting into the game. And so we were like, oh, here's an asset. Let's buy this one in a rural part of Illinois. We had heard about the debt buyer license requirements. We'd heard about don't buy rural. We heard about, if it's too small, don't buy it. So we sort of we threw caution to the wind and we went for this asset, which we got it at a good price. So it's about 30 or 40 minutes north of or around Peoria, Illinois.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know much about the market around the country, but Peoria.
I just think of Wayne's World, I think, or maybe that was Aurora. Maybe that wasn't Peoria, but yeah.
Yeah, it's actually where Caterpillar is.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but Peoria has not been in like the zone of like, how would you say it? The growth of the community. It's actually been sort of on a downturn for a long time. So. But anyways, we bought this asset. We thought, we have this, we really wanted to keep the borrower in the home. The first clue after we boarded the loan, I was following up with some of the due diligence I had done, and the water department person had sort of told me a few things. So I called her back up and I just wanted to get a sense if he was even paying the water bill. And she's like, oh no, this is the second house he's been in the community, and he's never paid the water bill until we turn it off. And then he comes in and he signs all this paperwork that he's going to pay, and he doesn't pay. So I don't really think you're going to get anything from this guy. So that was like, okay, but I'm still believing we can reach out. So I actually contacted Polaris, and we did the case with Andy, and he's like, I'm probably not, I don't think I want to take this case, because he didn't really think it was going to go anywhere. So we moved right into the legal, but none of the legal people would take it because we didn't have a debt buyers. So we didn't have a license, so we had to start that process. But I think before that, I had some trouble with even recording the deed, because there's this county, Stark County requires some kind of P-tax form, and the form can only be filled out by a lawyer. And I was like, so I was scrambling. I was like, just sort of in a black hole. And every week just seemed to drag on with one more thing I didn't know about real estate. So, we got through the recording, thanks to Erica, she helped me out. We got through the debt buyer license, which that took about six months.
Yeah.
Took about 6 months. And so after that happened, I was like, okay, finally, we're going to start moving forward on this legal. So I think all in all, it probably took, a good 8 months before we made any progress at all.
Oh, wow. Not to detour, but what did it cost you to get the debt buyer's license in Illinois?
It was $750, so it wasn't
Okay.
that expensive. But they wanted all of your books.
Uh-huh.
So just giving over your bookkeeping is
That's a little
somewhat personal.
scary.
It's a little personal. It's like, okay, you're going to give. So we had been working with Debbie Mullins and getting our bookkeeping. And
Yeah.
so I was okay with it. Luckily, we didn't have, like 10 years behind us.
It sounds a little weird though. Like I understand, like, you're going to report every year to the IRS, things like that, but giving it to like a random county seems kind of intrusive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually the state. It's a state kind of agency.
Or the state. Yeah.
So the application process took, it was like probably 15 to 20 pages. It was not that easy. We submitted it. They sent it back. It said we couldn't have copies on both sides of the paper. We only had to have copy on one side of the paper. So we had to redo a couple times. So it took some time.
But at least now you have it.
Yeah, we have it.
A lot of people don't buy in Illinois because they don't have the license. Now, if you get one reperforming, selling might be a little more tricky then, but at least now that's a pretty big advantage though, now that you have it. It opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah. And actually, we drive to Wisconsin every year. So we're always sort of in Illinois. Not all the way down, but we go to St. Louis.
Because you're based in Michigan, right?
Yeah, we're based in Michigan.
Yeah.
So I think Midwest, you have an affinity for it, even though probably it's the least favored state of many note investors is Illinois. The taxes are very high too.
Yeah, I've never done anything there. I just have this perception of it, or at least with like Chicago, just being corrupt. And like I said, I've never had dealings with there, so all of that's just sort of my perception from talking to other people. But yeah, it always scared me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, as we got closer to the actual court, and then it was working with a new attorney out of Chicago and, communicating, and it was brand new. Everything was brand new. And even the legal terms were new for me. But we finally could see that the date for the forfeiture was moving closer to mid-December. So probably in about mid-November, I reached out to Gail Villanueva, and she actually advised me to really use an EXP agent. And I've heard of this EXP real estate agent in the past. And I'm like, okay, do I do it like Dan and like rehab my own and, get my clean out crew and get a bin? And I was sort of overwhelmed with just that simple thing. So I just said, I need someone else.
They're not easy. Yeah.
You've been through a lot with that. So I'd heard you over and over and I'm like, I can't do that.
So tell me more about EXP, because I've heard of them, but I've actually not worked with them before, and I'm not that. One of the benefits of doing a podcast is you get to just have these conversations and figure all these things out.
You can learn more about it, exprealty.com. And they actually have like a find an agent, and anybody who is a broker can come on, sort of lose their shingle. If they're paying a lot of overhead for like a big office building or something, they can in a way lose the shingle and still be under a big sort of nationwide network. And they're allowed to get referrals. So they are getting a lot more kind of off the market or off the grid referrals. So the broker that I worked with, she had only been in it for maybe like, I want to say like a year. She just told me last night, I was trying to ask her some information, but she said she'd been in it for a short time, but she'd already gotten a lot of referrals from brand new people. And she'd been in a pretty reputable agency before that, and she wasn't getting a lot. So, we all know the inventory is a little lower now. So people are just looking for creative ways. And this is a great, you can search by state, by zip code, I think. So.
Cool. So how long did it take you to do the forfeiture from when you actually were able to start the legal process to when it was done?
I want to say that was probably a full 7 months.
Okay. Which is pretty long for a forfeiture. That's kind of,
because
like a lot of states that's like a foreclosure type timeline, but.
Yeah. So like by the time we had our debt buyers in May 31st, so June to December, like maybe 6.5 months. Yeah.
And then did you have to do an eviction at the end of that, or what did the borrower do?
So it was an eviction. Yeah. So they had to do a lockout.
Oh,
So
so that 7 months like included the eviction as well?
yeah, that was everything from
Oh,
start to
okay,
finish.
that's not too bad because like some counties can take forever to do an eviction
Okay.
depending on where it is. So the forfeiture plus that, I mean, it's still probably a little bit on the long side, but that's not crazy.
Right. We're still, for a non-performing no, we say 12 to 18 months. We're still in that window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, time that window gets eaten up
Yeah.
quickly until you know just do the servicing transfer if there is
Yep.
one, and then where I'm trying to tighten things up is that whole back and forth with the borrower, trying to get it reperforming because I have a lot that they go on a forbearance agreement and then they don't follow through on it, and so yeah, a lot of times I lose more time than I would like before I get to legal. And you had a similar thing, but maybe more on the getting the debt
Yeah, I
buyer's
think
license side.
our time got eaten up by the debt buyer kind of license, but I think we would have, if this borrower would have been engaged and we could have worked out a deal, or we could have, sort of did a forbearance, it may have spread it out just as long.
Now, did you
And
have any like communications with the borrower, even if it was like indirectly through the servicer? Did you ever get an idea like what their story was or what their?
no, we
Hmm,
moved it to self-managed pretty quick.
yeah.
Yeah. So we moved it to self-managed. But yeah, I mean, it's clear there was some, I don't exactly know, there might have been some divorce, or there might have been, it was a younger guy. I don't think he was like, an older gentleman not able to work. I think he was a sort of a family man.
Uh-huh.
Um, so,
Yeah, I've got a borrower like that in Michigan. He's like a 25-year-old guy. He's actually a machinist, has a really good job. He just doesn't like
okay.
paying bills. He's a hard case. Like I haven't run into very many of those, but sometimes you do run into those folks where there's no real story. It's just they just don't like paying bills.
I mean, I've had a number of people who need to have this like threat of like losing everything to pay, and they have the money. It's like I had to do a couple demand letters last year, and then they're like 3 months behind. I sent a demand letter because I'd already tried to do the outreach, and then they pay up.
Yeah, I had one. I don't remember if I've talked about this before in the podcast, but I had one in Muskegon, Michigan, that I went through the forfeiture, and the lady was, kind of like I described those as like hard cases, the ones where just you can't seem to get anything going. And on a contract for deed in Michigan, they have a 3-month redemption period.
Yeah.
It's 6 if it's a note, but I had to wait 3. So I was just waiting on the redemption, and it was like a $4,200 redemption. And I
Wow.
wasn't willing to make any deals with her because she had been, just very untrustworthy through the whole thing. And she ended up redeeming, which
Wow.
I would have bet $1,000,000 and lost, that she wouldn't have done that. Now, that particular one, she was also able to get some assistance from the state for like 1,800 of it, but she still had to cough up well over $2,000, which she did somehow. So
Yeah, I know. I
sometimes they
actually, in
surprise you.
Michigan, in Michigan, we are actually going through this with one of our CFDs in Michigan. There is some state assistance. So we had a settlement this week on a CFD. However, they needed, the borrower mentioned in her correspondence with the lawyer that she needed documentation that she was going to lose her house to get the assistance from the state.
Yeah, in this particular one, so the state called me and they
Okay.
needed something from me, and I gave her, some of the background on the deal, and where we were, and she said, well, do you want me to even bother writing this up? And my first thought was, well, she's probably busy. She's got a million of these, and some of them are probably, borrowers who really need help. And so I don't want to, waste her time on paperwork. But I was like, well, if the borrower's saying she wants to do this, we'll give her a shot. I'm like, yeah, let's process it. I'm like, I don't think she's going to come through. And then, yeah, they approved, I think the particular program, and I don't remember what it is, but they could provide up to like a maximum of $2,000.
Okay.
But then they do their analysis and they determine like what they will offer. And they offered, it was like 1,800 and change. Yeah,
Okay.
and then the borrower redeemed, and it
Great.
it worked out. And so then I was sure my in-laws live in Michigan, so I made sure to thank them for their tax dollars.
Well, Michigan still is a good place to invest. So we do a lot of investing in Michigan, and we're trying
Yeah,
to
I do
build
as
our own
well.
teams here and stuff. So it's good.
Yeah, cool. So now then, how did the eviction go down? To just the sheriff or the bailiff
So
go
it
out,
was
or?
the sheriff. And then at this point in time, I had gotten my agent. So she said, I can handle the lockout. I can handle finding the vendors. I can take pictures the day of. We can make sure the heat stays on a little bit, because it was coming up on winter. We're in December in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And so the day that there was the sheriff came to, they corresponded to the person who was going there on her team that met the sheriff. They had to just bring a copy of the final statement from the legal team, and the guy was out. So he didn't leave that much stuff. I was really happy. I mean, there was about 72 garbage bags. I don't know what that is in comparison to what a lot of stuff is.
That's nothing. I mean,
Right.
it seems like most of my cleanouts cost at least a couple $1,000.
Yeah.
My big one, and that deal that's still not over yet, there was one where I had 4 40-yard dumpsters. I had one a couple months ago where I think it was like 90 cubic yards
Okay.
of stuff total.
Okay.
So yeah, you got off easy. That's not bad.
Yes. So this is something new. I reached out to the trash people, and I asked them what their recommendation was, because I said, can I put extra bags at the street if I tell you ahead of time? And they said, actually, yes, you just have to go to City Hall and you have to estimate how many bags you have and get a little yellow tag for each bag. And then it's $1 a bag.
Oh, that's cool.
So she's like, actually, don't get a dumpster. She said, it's really easier if we just come and grab it all. So the
Yeah, that's
next
good.
day was the trash day. After we had the clean out, the next day was the trash day. It was perfect.
Oh, that's so nice. Because the other thing too, just so people know too, there are some, there are companies you can hire that will do it for you. And I've had some try to charge me, I think there's like a HUD schedule for pricing,
Okay.
which last time somebody quote, I don't know if it's changes over time, but at least as of last year, it was like $50 a cubic yard.
Oh,
So when I had that one that was like
that's a lot.
over 150 cubic yards, yeah, it was just an insane amount of money. And I was like, no, I've had some companies quote like $25 a cubic yard, which if it's a small amount, that can be okay just to get it done. What I did when I had my hoarder house that was the 160 cubic yards was I just went on Craigslist,
Yeah.
and you can just hire some local laborers for like $15 an hour or whatever. And then I
Okay.
rented my own dumpsters, because they'll bring them and deliver them. So,
Right.
it depends on what city you're in, but typically like a 40-yard dumpster, which is the biggest one, is about $500.
Okay.
And then, if you need another one, you can just pay another $500 and they'll, pick it up and drop it off.
Right.
And then you can have your Craigslist guys just go to town. And so
Right.
so like as I did that one time, if you ever run into a big one, that can be kind of like a cheap way.
Okay, that's great. Well, I think I was like only $572 in for the clean out and the trash.
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had one that cheap. I don't think.
I was super great. I mean, everything has been fairly easy. I am so grateful because I think I couldn't have handled anything. It was sort of right around the holidays. So then we were going into the holidays, and the agent was like, here's all the pictures. I think I can get some quotes, and let's target completing by the first first full week of January.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, okay. So we went to town. We had some trouble we had a little issue with plumbing. I had the water supposedly turned off because I wanted to make sure there was no issues, but I wanted to make sure the plumber got in there to make sure there was like a little drip or it was winterized and things like that. So all this was happening at once. He got there, or actually when the clean out crew got there, the day it was like he moved out on Saturday and they got there on Monday. The water, there was like a slow faucet run from the main pipe that came from the city to the house.
Okay.
So it looked like, the plumber said it looked like someone had actually turned it and then actually broke it. So this was actually, so then there was water coming into the basement. Okay. So then I got the water off, got a guy in there. At the same time, maybe a couple days like into the rehab, some random person said there was no, the guy came in to do the floors or the painting or whatever. And he said, hey, there's no power. And I was like, wait, I've been working. I put my name in, all the utilities.
And the power had been on?
And pardon?
And the power had been on previously?
The power had been on, and then it's off. And I was like, okay, let me call them and find out what happened. And they were like, well, somebody called and told me to turn it off. And I was like, well, was it me or was it this property management group? And they said, no. Miss King is listed on this. I was like,
King?
Oh, King. Okay. King who? King the neighbor, King the contractor. So I'm calling my agent. She's like, no, none of us said this. So here I am thinking the borrower might have just, the old, maybe disgruntled borrower might have called them and said, hey, turn off the power. I'm a contractor. And I said, how can you turn off someone else's power without permission? And he said, oh, we have this all the time. Contractors call us all the time. So we lost.
Yeah, because I've never heard of anybody maliciously turning off power to a house. That's probably why they don't worry about it.
Right. It doesn't happen that much, right?
Although hopefully teenagers don't realize you can do that, or that could become more of a thing.
Yeah. So we were without power. We lost a couple days of rehab. We had to, the agent was really great at sort of managing the contractor because she had gotten a quote for the flooring. And when we worked through the numbers to go, okay, should we just sell it as is? And the reason why we didn't sell it as is because the house next door was being sold as is. So if you could choose between, not next door, but like down the street or something. And I was like, well, if you could choose two similar houses to move into, the one as is here, the one as is here, it's like, I'd rather be like a little bit better on the selling potential. So we just decided the numbers where we put the money in. Mm-hmm. And we just put in about 5,000.
Okay. And then I'm curious on rehabs. I don't know if you're done with it yet, but how did what you ultimately spent compared to what you expected to spend going in? Like, did other things come up or was it kind of smooth?
So the only thing we had to do is we had to special order the transitions, I guess. And so those are coming in today. So I don't know how much those were exactly. We actually saved about $300 in labor because we actually had a quote initially for the flooring people to come in and deliver and put it in. But we ended up hiring the contractor that was already there in the house, that knew the house, was working on all the projects to do all of it. So I think we're going to be pretty close. We had a little incident later on though, recently. I think it was, I don't know if it's like even 5 days ago. I get a call that the power is out again. I'm like, okay, who's calling and turning off that power?
Yeah.
And the contractor walked around the house and saw the neighbor's tree had fallen down and took the main wires out of that went into the house down.
Oh, wow.
So
But it didn't hit the house, it just took out the wire?
It's called the hub and the wire. Okay, the hub itself, I don't know what, I'm not an electrician, but some
hub. Like the tree came down between the pole and the house, so the tree didn't hit the house itself, it just knocked out the wire.
Yeah, it actually hit a little bit of the garage.
Oh, okay.
So it hit a little bit of the garage and took down the hub and the wire, so we were out of power. But we took pictures, and my agent, again, she's crackerjack. She's like, you know what? I talked to the neighbor, and they're going to let us put their insurance on this claim because it was their tree, and it was a dead tree. It wasn't a living tree.
Oh, so it was a dead tree. There was just maybe a windstorm. There wasn't like a chainsaw cut from where the borrower was out there or something. There was.
Right. You never know. I mean, there could have been some shenanigans about that tree. But so I was, they said, okay, the electrician was like $600. I'm like, wow, okay, that's a lot of money for just, but I don't know what replacing a hub is and all this stuff.
Yeah, I have no idea what those cost. That just at first glance, that doesn't sound completely insane, just because
Right.
usually it's, a certain amount of money just to get them out there. And yeah.
Right. So I think, surprisingly, just today I get a phone call. So this is fresh off the press. And that's what
Okay.
note investing does. Okay. It's like, you never know what kind of funny, difficult, challenging, or happy thing that's going to happen. And I just feel like I have been blessed through this REO, because I don't know if I keep doing REOs if I had a bad first one. So the insurance company calls me today. He introduces himself. He actually is a neighbor to the neighbor whose tree fell down, who has his own insurance company. He says that he is offering, they've inspected the damage to the actual garage. He went through the other things that they'd looked over, and there is a claim. He gave me a claim number, and he is going to likely reimburse me like just under $1,000. Now, I said, well, did you talk to my property management group, because they have the electrician bill for like $600? He goes, well, we'll do that, but likely I could possibly make $1,500 on the deal.
Oh, wow.
The tree came down, and he educated me. He said, because the tree was dead, if normal trees just come down and crash through your house, it's like an act of God. It's not anything that you could blame on the homeowner. But because this house, because the tree was dead, and the guy knew it was dead, and he still hadn't done anything about it, it was actually it can be
liability on that.
A liability.
Okay, gotcha. That's good to know. Because I have a property with a dead tree on it.
Okay.
That I have not cut down. So, and it hasn't fallen down yet. So.
Yeah. So I just feel like, by Sunday we should be listing this asset. So the like I said, the transitions came in. They'll get the final pictures on the weekend, and it'll be listed.
So what's the overall condition of the property now? I mean, do you think you'll be selling this to like an investor or a local fix and flipper, or would it be more of like a retail buyer potentially?
So it's it's probably only like I don't know if it's like worth like 50,000 or something. Basically, we never really imagined us working to sell and put a note in it. We're definitely not going to put a renter in it because it's too rural. But the agent mentioned that she said many farmers in the area just pay cash for things.
Yeah.
So they just find houses, and they pay cash, and they, maybe it's a young couple or something, and they get part of the farm, or I don't know.
Huh.
So, yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting. Yeah.
We'll see what
selling
happens.
them is always tricky. And, if this is an investor, the time of year we're recording this at the end of January, it may not come out for a few weeks later, but, it may not be too bad. I've got a handful of REOs right now. And it was interesting that after New Year's, for some reason, I started getting a bunch of offers on them. I don't know what it was. It was like a switch flipped after the new year. So I don't know if it's that. In some of these were to more investor type. So I don't know if it's like they want to buy this time of year so they can do their fix up and then sell them when you get into like the spring, summer, hot season, or, if these people spent, the holidays listening to motivational stuff about setting their goals, and they're like, I got to go out and get some offers in. I have no idea. But it seemed like when it got to January, like things really broke loose, which kind of surprised me, because I'm like, well, it's the dead of winter.
Right.
I thought maybe it would take a few more months.
Yeah.
Till things, at least for my stuff, it's just picked up.
Yeah, the agent mentioned that the inventory in general is low. Like there's just not that many choices. So if people want affordable housing, I mean, we could always put a note on it, have another land contract or something. But our sort of best strategy is to sort of get out of the rural area of Illinois.
Yeah,
and just
that's not a
call it.
bad idea. And overall, I mean, that experience sounds relatively smooth, especially considering that it's rural. I mean, I haven't done any that were rural, but I've got some in a town that's maybe like 80,000 or something like that. It's kind of a smaller
Yeah,
area, and it gets tough because there are only so many contractors and realtors and other folks. And so if the 1, 2 there are terrible, it really gets tough to
right.
deal with.
So this agent is now sort of curious about note investing, and she's very interested in this whole process. And she said, you really caught me at a good time by when you asked me, and you didn't ask me at the last minute. You could project potentially when it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So she said that, she might have gotten another call. Actually, she got another call from another investor with a property similar to ours in Peoria, and she said we passed on it. She goes, but now that I know what we've done and how we've helped you out, it's like if it's the right time, we might take another one like this. So
Oh,
she's
so had she had experience with foreclosures before, or no?
she was actually I think her whole skill set is around getting houses ready to go on the market. So maybe not subprime kind of houses, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's really good because one of the things I always do when I call around and look for realtors, I ask them if they do foreclosures and REOs because there are a lot of realtors who just kind of specialize in that, and then there are a lot of other ones who have nothing to do with it and know what you're talking about and just aren't
Yeah.
interested. So I always ask about that as like kind of a filter, but it's always amazing when you find the right ones who have a lot of experience dealing with those, and they have their own local contractors who can handle clean outs, and they know to get everything secured, and they have somebody that can get it winterized. That makes life a lot easier because when you don't have that and you're trying to herd cats, rounding up all those little things, it gets really, really tough, especially when you're working at a distance.
Yes. Yes. And it's really nice. This gal, she's married to her husband actually, and they have a husband and wife team. So she's the agent, and he runs the property management group. And they have
Okay.
a full portal, so I could go in and log in and see all my receipts and how much has been used and quoted and things like that. And the communication has been really exceptional. So,
That's
I mean,
amazing.
just to think about not much more than about 6 weeks, I think we lost a little time over the holidays, but we expected that. And I think we might have lost like 4 days in there between power outages and trees down and, things like that. And then waiting on these door transitions. So I think all in all, I'm really happy with the experience. And, now we'll see how long I have to sit with the house on the market.
Yeah, I mean, so far that's not bad at all. I've had
Right.
far worse before. So, but yeah, and then selling it, especially in the smaller area, could be
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
tricky part. So hopefully that goes smoothly too when you get to the.
Right. Well,
Make,
Dan, I've always call you, and get advice from you because you have a lot of wisdom. I mean, even when I was trying to decide, like, do I put any money into it or do I, just sell it as is? And what's the pro and con? And you sort of taught me a little bit about how to sort of realistically think about things. And some of your experiences were like, okay, if you start doing a few things, then they find more. Or if the buyer comes in and they say, well, we want this and this done too, or something. And so you get this risk of doing a little bit of something and then they want more, right?
yeah, I mean, and that's what I've run into a lot is, especially when I was dealing with my first REO, I took on some rehab work expecting that to be it. And then they come back and it's like, oh, well, there's this other thing that's broken. And then, oh, there's this other one. Like the first one, I felt like I was like fighting a tar baby. It just never quite ended, and then I would say, well, okay, let's go through everything, make sure this is the last thing. Okay, great, great, great. And then there's something else that comes up later. Yeah. So, these days, I mean, I do take on rehab work. In fact, we just completed one here very recently. But I always these days, I kind of tread lightly with it because you don't know what else you're going to uncover. when
Right.
you get into it, and there needs to be like a really clearly defined ROI to it.
Yeah.
So like one example recently where I did it. So this was it was a foreclosure, and then the borrower left. So I thought it was a foreclosure, and this was one that had been like really stale. The borrower hadn't paid in like a really long time. So
Hmm.
we got through the foreclosure process, and I was assuming I was going to have to do an eviction. So we're getting ready to start that process. And then the borrower called me, and I had never been able to get a hold of the borrower. And he said, "Oh yeah, we moved out. We're going on. It's all yours." It was great. Really hell of a nice guy. Hadn't paid a mortgage payment in like 3 years or something like that. And this was I think it was like October. We had this conversation. Okay. And the house on the outside looked in very good shape. In fact, I had walked in front of it. And so I was pretty pumped about this one. But when we got in, we found that they had these dogs, and the dogs just tore the hell out of the place.
Oh,
Actually, like tore up flooring and drywall. And there was this. I wasn't actually in the house, but everybody said there was like just this bad dog poo stench
smell.
throughout the whole thing. So that was disappointing. And so at that point, I kind of knew it was going to be more of a sale to an investor, because I wasn't going to be willing to go in deep to get it fully rehabbed to sell it to a retail person, especially in this town where I had other issues trying to do that.
Right.
But dog smell is particularly repugnant. So I'm like, I don't want any buyers to smell that. That's just gonna make it tough. So I had my local guy there. We did some research, and I can't remember what it is now, but there's a specific kind of paint you can use
Yeah,
that
I've
kills
heard of this.
smells. So we ended up having the ducting cleaned out. There was all kinds of dog hair, like all in the ducting, and even they pulled out like 4 or 5 dog toys from
Oh
different
my gosh.
places. But they stripped everything down, painted it with this paint, and they said the smell got completely killed. So that worked. Now, there's always one more thing, but then I found out they had to get the furnace going, because they were doing this over the winter time, and they had fixed one thing on the furnace, and they go in there and they're like, "Oh, there's a cracked heat exchanger. The furnace is dead." And I
No.
said, "Well, I'm not fixing that." So ended up, and this was, then once we got past the new year, I ended up getting multiple offers on it. So we have it under contract now to sell. They're actually doing the inspection on it today or tomorrow as we record this. But it's an as is, and it's an investor. They know about the furnace and whatnot. So hopefully everything goes through. But pricing wise, it actually worked out good enough. I mean, the deal wasn't anywhere near where I expected, just because of the condition of the inside. And that was and that's another lesson learned. And I've run into this on other REOs, but I've kind of found that it seems like most people who either just ride the ship down in a foreclosure or sign off on a cash for keys, they tend to live a rough lifestyle.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
if the outside of the house is okay, a lot of times they just trash
Hmm.
the inside. And it's not a thing where there's like vandalism. It's not like they're breaking things on the way out. I haven't really run into that. It's just they live a rough lifestyle. Just everything's in bad shape. But after I found out about the furnace and the cracked heat exchanger, it dawned on me. I'm like, when I had talked to the borrower, he had mentioned that the heater works, but it wasn't real strong. And he left after multiple years of not paying right when it started to get cold. And
So
so
he
he
might have
probably,
been living there without any heat.
well, and yeah, so what he might have done was just stayed in there until it started to get cold, and then he
Hmm.
bailed,
There you
because he
go.
wasn't going to pay to fix the furnace. So
Right.
so
Hmm.
who knows? I mean, I don't know that that's the case, but that's kind of my
Interesting.
suspicion. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's the challenge, I think, of note investing is when you are doing all your calculations, you really can't see the inside of the house. And you have to trust that the investment that you're making is actually going to stand to maybe an inside that's not that good. So,
yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is, I mean, really, if you're doing a foreclosure scenario, it's like all bets are off. you don't know. I mean, I've had other ones that were home runs. I had one in Cincinnati last year where the borrower basically walked away from a lot of equity. It was a contract for deed where I did a forfeiture. And that was a huge success. But you don't know what you're going to get in terms of the condition of the inside. You don't know what kind of clean out you're going to face. You don't know if you're going to have to do an eviction and how long that can get drug out. So you can't really predict an ROI
Right.
on a foreclosure scenario. But yeah, to your point, what I try to do is look at how much margin do I have.
Right.
Like I've got I'm starting to get enough data points now. I can kind of say, well, okay, here's what I expect the expenses to be, but there's a big variance on that. And kind of the way that I've been pricing them is, if it's one where I know there's a high likelihood of foreclosure, then I need to have a higher projected ROI on that. I buy a lot that have 8, 9, 10 payments in the last year where I know I've got a really high hit rate for getting them to reperform.
Right.
And if it's that scenario, because on my, and I'll have to do a podcast on this, but a while back I sold a bunch of reperformers. So I got some pretty good data on ROIs to expect from reperformers. And it was actually, what was it? It was like in the high teens to the JV investor, like annualized. And that was after the split. So if you can get them to reperform, even if you're buying ones that are, have a lot of payments to where the price is a little higher, those are just those are super juicy. So, I'll risk a couple foreclosures to get a bunch of those that are going to reperform. But if it's one that I know I'm going to end up with the property, then I get super, super conservative.
Right.
And I found that my BPO values and related to where I sell the property at, all over.
How do those BPO values look, Dan, compared to what your actual as is 30-day quick sale?
I've never sold one for the 30-day quick sale, and I've had a good 5 or 6, in the last 6 months or so. So, yeah. So I don't know. I had Justin Bogart on a while back. He was saying a lot of times he doesn't pull BPOs. Some of that's because he's doing performing and he's getting eyes on them, and he's evaluating them, his own way. But I'm starting to consider going that route and just getting photos and doing my own comps and talking to the realtors and then kind of putting my own value together. Because what appears to happen as like I said, as I gather more data, I'm starting to go through some of this and I'm getting a little better line on what to expect. Like in the BPOs, the realtors will have like a base value and then they'll say, well, there are these exterior repairs that are needed. And so they'll deduct for repairs that they can see. But it seems like, but then they just assume the inside is pristine. It's like, well, I don't see anything that needs repair on the inside, so I'm not deducting anything. But if it's a foreclosure or even a deed in lieu, there's always going to be some degree of stuff messed up.
Right.
On the inside. So as time goes on, I get more and more conservative with how I treat BPO values.
Right. I mean, I think each kind of deal, Dan, is like lessons learned. And you just put those lessons into your, into your arsenal, and you have more wisdom about what you're doing. And I consider myself fairly lucky going through something like this as, my first REO. I can't predict that each one's going to be like this, but I definitely feel, I learned to get a team. I learned to expect the unexpected. Now I know that delegation is really the best use of my time as a note investor. If I can delegate, whatever I can delegate is better. And then, be grateful. I mean, one of the things I had to do is I said, hey, please give this contractor, some money, because he came to the house. He didn't have power. It was like the second time in a row he didn't either have power or water. And I was like, just give him, pay him for his miles, like do something so that he doesn't get, appreciate him for what he's doing.
Yeah, you're lucky he showed up. I mean, a lot of times they don't even show up.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right. Well, that's probably a good starting point for now. We'll have to have you back on again, and we'll see how the sales end of it.
Yeah. Let's hope for the best.
And where you end up on it. So I think you are coming into a good time of the year. And
yeah.
fortunately,
Thank you, Dan. Thank
Yeah,
you.
anytime.
I always learn a lot, and I always I'm happy to share what I've learned along the way as well.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot all the time anyway, so it's good
Right.
just to record some of these. So how can people get a hold of you though if they want to reach out and have
Best way
questions?
is through email, noteworthydeal@gmail.com.
Okay.
And it's Melanie Jacob at jacobassociates.com.
Okay, cool. We'll put those links in the show
Okay.
notes and to your website as well. So
Yeah,
so
and
again,
connect on Facebook or something if you're not into email, and just connect on Facebook.
all right, sounds good. Well, thanks again. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Dan. All right.